Undersecretary Burns has agreed to take a couple of questions. We have several cards that have already been submitted. Let me try to condense these. There have been a couple of questions, Ambassador Burns, regarding the 3 American hikers that wandered in, according to their family, into Iran from Iraq. We see in the press that the Iranian government has just charged them as spies and that they'll be facing trial. Could you comment on this incident and how has it impacted on our relationship with Iran and our talks with them?
Sure, thanks. Well, I'll simply echo what Secretary Clinton said yesterday, and that is that we strongly believe, and we urge the Iranian government to release the 3 hikers who are innocent and as an act of compassion ought to be allowed to return to their families. We've seen, as is often the case, conflicting signals out of Tehran. I saw the foreign minister was quoted earlier today as saying that while the 3 hikers, according to the Iranian government, crossed illegally into Iran, they're still exploring what, if any, further charges will be made. So again, I would simply echo Secretary Clinton's call for their immediate release.
Another couple of questions regard the recognition of Israel as a Jewish state, and wondering if the administration agrees with that Likud position.
Well, I think the United States for a long time has made clear our support for Israel's security as a state which obviously provides a homeland for the Jewish people. And it continues to be our very strong view that the best interests of Israel as well as of Palestinians are served by actually achieving, rather than just talking about, a 2-state solution, because that's the only way in which you can bring about lasting security for Israel, as well as realizing the legitimate political aspirations of Palestinians and providing them with the dignity that they deserve as well.
Secretary Burns, you mentioned a quote from the Palestinian doctor who we honored last night, Izzeldin Abelesh, who lost his family members, his children, in Gaza. We have a question here regarding Gaza and the fact that reconstruction materials and some humanitarian materials are still yet to get into Gaza. And the question is, why won't or can't the U.S. pressure Israel to open access to Gaza for humanitarian and reconstruction materials before the winter sets in?
Well, I share the concern about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and the United States government continues to work hard, along with the United Nations, to try to ensure that adequate humanitarian supplies reach people who desperately need it, especially, as you said, as we get closer to the winter. So more needs to be done, and we will continue to push hard.
Question regarding the deadline for our negotiations with Iran. European leaders have put a December deadline for Iran to move on with the nuclear program. Is this the case for the United States?
Well, President Obama has been very clear on several occasions in stating that the United States, that he believes that we need to make some judgments about whether engagement is producing results by the end of the year. And the one thing that we've worked very hard on is a partnership within the so-called P5+1, not just with Britain, France, and Germany, but also with the Russians and the Chinese. And I think the unity that I think is apparent in our efforts is an extremely important part of our diplomacy, and we're going to continue to work hard at that. Mohammed al-Baradei, I thought, put it very well when he talked about the very significant opportunity that lies before Iran in the proposal to provide fuel for the Tehran research reactor. He characterized it as a very important but fleeting opportunity. And we hope very much that Iran will take advantage of that, because here's an opportunity to meet what the Iranian government itself has identified as an immediate humanitarian need, to provide fuel for a research reactor under IAEA safeguards, which largely produces medical isotopes for cancer patients. Iran has a stockpile of LEU for which it has no immediate legitimate use, and it would seem to us to be a very sensible proposition and a very straightforward way of establishing the peaceful ambitions of Iran's nuclear program, as well as to build confidence in the rest of the world for it to move ahead and accept the very creative proposal that Mr. El-Baradei has put forward.
I've been reminded by my staff that you promised 3 questions, and I've already squeezed in many more than that. So let's just do 2 more, and I hope I'm not abusing a friendship here.
The new math at the Middle East Institute.
That's right. When do we expect to have a U.S. ambassador in Damascus?
Well, I mean, President Obama has already made clear our determination to return an ambassador to Damascus. I can't put an exact time frame on it, but we will certainly follow through on that.
Good. And the final question, you talk about unity in Iraq. Could you comment on the Kurdish situation?
On the Kurdish situation?
Yeah,
well,
Kurds
I mean, I think if you look at what I mentioned in my opening remarks about the elections law, which was just passed by the Iraqi Council of Representatives, much of the controversy surrounded that had to do with Kirkuk and the very complicated issues that surround it. I think it's to the credit of Iraqi politicians that after a lot of very intense political debate, they were able to reach a solution which allowed for passage of that elections law. That doesn't mean to suggest that all the questions and controversies surrounding relations between groups and political participation in Iraq have been solved as a result of the passage of that one law. But I do think it's encouraging that by contrast to a recent past in which political differences were settled through the barrel of a gun, that in this case, notwithstanding the continuing violence from extremists that you see in Iraq, Iraqis themselves, through political means, were able to take an important step forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.